Bonnie Huff with the Marin Women's Hall of Fame, and we're here this evening to talk about Martha Martinez, who was one of our 1996 honorees in the Marin Women's Hall of Fame. Martha was a beloved leader in the Latino and senior communities. Through her paid and volunteer work, she brought people together with compassion and grace. Unfortunately, she is not able to be with us as she passed away in 1995. But we do have with us this evening her husband, Tom Martinez, and her daughter, Yvette. Welcome, Tom and Yvette.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
How did you feel when you found out that your mother had become a member of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame?
Oh, we were very excited, a little taken back, but very excited that my mother's hard work in the community was recognized. It was difficult at first because my mother wasn't here to accept the award. However, I feel that through her everyday work, she gained the pleasure and satisfaction that she would have received the night of the ceremony. But we were very excited.
That's wonderful. If you were trying to condense the essence of Martha in a time capsule, what might you put inside that? What do you think was her special gift, her essence?
Well, Martha was a very compassionate person, and she always seemed to have time or make time for somebody. She was never a person who would put you off. If you needed some assistance in some way, she always made time for that. And I think if you were to put it in a capsule, in a sentence, you might say that she always gave a lot of herself and expected very little in return. She didn't expect a lot of thanks for what she did for you. She just wanted to do the work and help you however she could, but didn't expect anything in return for what she did.
What were the kinds of issues that were most important for Martha?
Well, she was very concerned about the seniors, the Latino seniors in the community. She got started in that in about 1984. We moved to Marin in '79. And she became involved with the Hispanic community beginning at La Familia Center, where she was working, and she became an advocate for the seniors. She thought that they needed some protection and help, and that's what she dedicated herself to helping seniors in Marin County.
Was she also concerned about educational issues, or?
Yes, she was. There were several times, in fact, a couple of times she got some scholarships for some young women to, I remember one was for Branson School and one was for Dominican School. She helped them, and then she was always encouraging young women to complete their education. They had a program at Dominican College called Pathways, and she was always encouraging them to finish their education through that program. So yeah, she was very concerned about young people completing their education. She thought that was very important.
That's wonderful. Well, let's take a moment and think back about her roots. And where did Martha come from?
Well, Martha was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, in Mexico. She lived there for 3 or 4 years after, and then they moved to Mexico City. And she went to school in Mexico City at the German school. Her dad was German ancestry. Her dad was born in Germany, Kaltenhof in northern Germany, who came to Mexico 1930, I think it was, and then married a Mexican woman. Her name was Maria Victoria. So and then when Martha got to the 5th grade, they sent her to study in the United States at that time, I think. Everybody thought it was better for kids to go to school in the U.S., and so they sent her to school in San Antonio, Texas, where she studied from the 5th grade through 12th grade.
Yeah. So that was a boarding school?
Yes, it was. It was an all-girls school. It was called Our Lady of the Lake in San Antonio, Texas, a very large school. And she spent 8 years there and only went home in the summer, so that was quite a big chunk of her life that she spent in Texas with the nuns there. I think they were called the Sisters of Divine Providence. And then when she returned to Mexico, she completed her college and then started working in Mexico City.
What kind of work did she do in Mexico City?
Well, she started as a translator for the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations. Then she left that and went to work for her father he owned a coffee exporting business. She worked with him briefly for about 8 months or so, then came back to Mexico City, and she worked for two advertising agencies, Young and Rubicon, and another one. And then she left that, and she went to work for the Department of Agriculture. She became the secretary to the Minister of Agriculture. And that's where she was working when we met, working for the Minister of Agriculture. There was something really interesting that happened while she was working at the ministry there. She was selected to be a hostess for the delegates for the Olympic Committee. At that time, Mexico was competing for the '68 Olympics, right, and they hadn't yet chosen Mexico City to be the host country. So they were had all these delegates there looking at Mexico to see if it was qualified. And Martha had 6 Olympic committee persons assigned to her. And I remember some of them. One was from France, Madame Sankey. No, Switzerland, Madame Sankey, I still remember. There was a man from Turkey. And then there was Lebanon, another Arab country. I don't remember the others. But she had 6. And her job was to take care of these people and translate for them and make sure they got where they had to be and their accommodations and, well, everything that had to be done for delegates to the Olympics. Very interesting.
Yeah. So she knew Spanish.
She spoke, oh yeah, she spoke Spanish and she spoke German, and of course English.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was fluent in all 3 languages. Yeah. Yeah.
So then she met you.
Well, yeah, she was working at the Ministry of Agriculture when we met. That was in 1964. I had gone to Mexico on vacation. Actually, I was going to go to Hawaii, and my brother had a girlfriend who was from Costa Rica who knew Martha. He says, "Why are you going to Hawaii? Why don't you go to Mexico? It's a lot more fun over there. They have the beaches is just as good. And besides that, I know somebody over there, and you can meet and get to know Mexico City better." I says, "Well, fine." So she writes to Martha and says, "My future brother-in-law is coming to Mexico City. He'll be calling you when he gets there, blah, blah, blah." Well, my brother never married this girl from Costa Rica, but I ended up marrying Martha. And that was in 1964, and it wasn't a long courtship because we were married a year later, 1965, in San Francisco.
Wow. And so at that time, she came and lived with you in the States.
Right. That was a hard transition for her because here she was leaving, again, another hard trip for her because she had already spent 8 years in Texas away from home, the majority of the time except for the summers. That was hard for her, but she got a good education there. And then now she had to make another transition and leave all her friends and her relatives, her parents, and come to the United States again, much further away. And that was a hard decision for her, but she finally decided that's what she was going to do. And she came here to San Francisco, and we were married in San Francisco.
And then she became a mother?
Yeah, she became a mother in 1966 when my older daughter, Veronica, was born. And then 3 years later, Yvette was born. So we had two lovely girls, very good looking, bright girls. And it's wonderful. And Martha was so proud of these girls as I am, and we had a great time. One of the things, and I'll just lead you into it, and then maybe Yvette can fill you in more about this, is that ever since Veronica and Yvette were born, they spent every summer in Mexico with their grandparents. As they got a little older, they spent more time. Well, the summer they spent, the first when they were infants, they spent like 3 or 4 weeks, and Martha used to stay there another 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a month altogether. And then as they got older, they spent the whole summer, 6 weeks, every single year until their grandparents passed away. So they got to know quite a bit of Mexico and the culture over there, for spending so much time in Mexico. You spend 6 weeks with your grandparents every single year, you get to know quite a bit about them. And they got to learn a little bit of German with their grandfather. So maybe you can expand on that.
Well, one of the things I'm very grateful that my parents, not only my mom, my father did too, but especially my mother did for me, is to instill and, first of all, our family values, and to raise me in a bicultural home. It would have been the easy way out for her to just say, I'm here in California, she's going to an American school, what's the use? But she did speak to me in English and Spanish simultaneously. She did talk about important events going on in the Hispanic countries around the world, and did emphasize that how proud my mother was of being Latina, and of course, because of that, today I'm very proud to say that I'm Latina and bicultured and speak 2 languages and can even cook food from Mexico. And just having that exposure, even though I live here and I'm very happy living in the United States, I think it's very important for people to have a broad view of the world, especially if your heritage stems, like most of us does, from another country. So that was very important, and she even did that with our German heritage as well during the holidays too. Not as much, but definitely it's something that I can continue to keep in my daily life, and one day pass it on to my future children as well. So that is something that I'm very grateful to my mother for doing, and hopefully I will be able to do the same thing for my children too.
She didn't work when the girls were growing up.
No.
And when and what was that like for you?
Well, now that my mother has passed on and I reflect back on the memories that I have of my mother, that's one of the main things that I remember, is that my mom was at home with me and was there to, if I needed help with my homework, she was there. And when I walked through that door, and it did help me as far as self-esteem and feeling loved, just a young child walking through the door knowing that your mother is there. But one thing that my mother, yes, she dedicated a lot of her time to her family, but my mother was very good at balance. She always told me, Yvette, you can have a career, you can be a good mother and a wife and fulfill any personal interests or hobbies that you have, and you just need to learn how to balance that, and you will find satisfaction with all of it. And that was something that my mom had in her life, a balance between her family, career, personal interests. Nothing seemed to give with her because she made the time, and that is something that she's taught me, and that I've applied in my life as well, to say, oh, it's okay that I have a career and I'm married. And referencing back to my mother's importance on education, I'm a returning student as an adult to the Dominican College Pathways program. And my mother was the one that said, you can do that. You can be married and have a career and go back to school and get your college degree. So I'm very proud that I'm completing this program, and I should be done next year. And it's thanks to my mom telling me that balance can be made if you put the effort to do that.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And so she returned to work on a part-time basis.
On a part-time
when
basis.
you were in about 3rd grade, is that?
Yeah, that's about right.
3rd grade, yes.
And at that point, was she getting more involved in the community, or?
At that time, when we were living in San Francisco and South San Francisco, she was involved with the Latin community, but with the Mexican, and that time it was only through the Mexican community, because we were involved through the Mexican consulate. That time, Adolfo Dominguez was the consul general, and they always had something going on. Every 16th of September, which is Mexican Independence Day, they would have the Mexican Independence Day celebration in San Francisco, which they still do. And it would be done at City Hall, which I don't know if they do that anymore. but they would send a representative from Mexico, and used to be a minister. They don't do that anymore. And then the mayor would be involved. So it was a big thing in those days. And they would use the balcony of City Hall to give the Mexican, what they call El Grito, which is the cry of independence. And she was involved with the planning of all that kind of stuff. And one of the things she used to do for people like who were like the president of the committee or something, and they had to give their speech, they would say, Martha, would you write my speech for me in Spanish? Because she was really terrific at doing that. So she used to write a lot of speeches.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And very involved with the Mexican community at that time. It was only the Mexican community. She wasn't focused on the elderly at the time. When we moved to San Rafael, that's what she focused on, the seniors.
How do you think that she got more involved with the seniors?
Well, when she went to work with La Familia Center, at that time, the seniors weren't involved. What we had was people who needed help, and Martha was helping these people, like posting bulletin boards for jobs and interviewing and see what kind of help. And then, little by little, she started seeing the seniors and became involved. She says, this is where I want to be. I want to focus my attention on being an advocate for seniors, because they're the ones who need the most help. They're older, they're more frail, most of them are lower income, and they need help. They need advocacy and referrals, and this is what I want to do, is focus on that. And that's what she started doing at that time. That was about 1985 or so. And they organized a senior program. At that time, Joanna Uribe was the executive director, and she says, yeah, Martha, why don't we do that? And so she became like an outreach coordinator, senior outreach coordinator. And she formed a group of Latino seniors. And that group got quite big. I think she had like 80 at one time. Of course, not of them were active at one time. They used to meet, and they still do, every Wednesday. And they say maybe 35, 40, 45 would show up for those meetings. Yeah, so that's since 1985 or so. She got focused on seniors.
So was that primarily a social group, or what?
Well, no, well, it was a social group in that she got them together so that she thought it was important that seniors need to have interaction so that they don't have isolation and depression. She thought that's very important, and that's one way to do it. Then she would plan little short trips for them, like outings, that kind of thing. And at these meetings, she said that one of the important things of having these luncheons is that, and you talk to them, you can assess by speaking to these seniors what their state of mind is. And if she thought they were in a bad state, a depressed state, she'd say, this person needs counseling, and then she would get a counselor to talk to that person in depression. Like that. She says that was a very good time to find out. If you don't talk to them, how are you going to assess their needs, she said. So that was one of her indicators.
That's wonderful. And then she joined the Commission on Aging.
Yeah. Well, she had been going to the Commission on Aging and advocating for seniors. And she told me one time, you know what, I'd like to be a commissioner so I could be a stronger advocate. So she, when there was an opening, she applied for that opening. And at that time, I think Robert Stockwell was the supervisor of Novato, and he interviewed several people, including Martha, and selected her. And she was so proud to be selected to the Commission on Aging. And she says, well, how do you like living with a commissioner?
Oh, yeah, that was your thing. She called, this is the commissioner.
So she was really happy to do that. And she served for 5 years, and that gave her a stronger podium to advocate for seniors. And particularly one of her big interests too was transportation. She always thought seniors have a very hard time with transportation. And at that Commission on Aging, she worked hard to make sure that they could get transportation for these seniors. What's good, as she said, is having a program if you can't get from A to B. If you can't go to the meetings, you can't go to the hospital, if you can't go to your appointments or whatever it was. So she worked hard on that, and they worked out some pretty good plans to get some transportation. And then through Whistle Stop, which has transportation, also they were able to get more transportation. So it worked out fairly well.
Martha was also instrumental in founding the Language Bank.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
She started that because not only are there a lot of Spanish-speaking seniors, but there's Russian-speaking, and there was some Persian-speaking, and several other languages, and I can't remember. She told me. She says, you know what we need? Some of these people who go to an appointment, for instance, at the hospital or a doctor, and then they can't get their point across, they need a translator. So she started this language bank. What she did is she recruited over 40 volunteers, bilingual volunteers, in Russian, in Farsi, which is the Iranian, in, what was the others? In German, in
French, I believe.
French, in Italian, several languages. And she formed this bank so that if some agency, like the Marin General Hospital, had somebody and they couldn't speak to them, well, let's phone this language bank and see if they can assign a volunteer to translate for us. That was the whole idea for it, and she formed that. She developed that program and formed it and recruited the volunteers for it. Yeah, and it worked out very well.
That was one of
And then she got Pacific Bell to donate all the equipment.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was one of her proudest accomplishments, was that language bank.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful service.
Yeah.
Yeah. She developed a lot of programs. Another one, well, she was a volunteer with the Nevada, volunteer in several areas, but she did a lot of work for the Nevada Police Department. They had asked her, through the coalition meetings that she had, they said, Martha, can you volunteer for the Nevada Police? Sure, what do you want me to do? We want you to translate all this literature we have, pamphlets and information and all kinds of things that we need to translate. Sure, and she used to go down there and spend a lot of time of her own doing all this work. And one time in talking to one of the police officers over there, I think it was Officer Mendoza, they had a problem with one of the seniors. An officer responded to one of the houses, and then once they got there, and the officer said, well, now that we found out this is a senior who needs help, what are we going to do with this lady? The officer didn't know what to do. What's the police department going to do? We got to refer this person someplace. And I said, well, let me handle it. I'll refer her someplace. But, you know, she says, there's a lot of people, homebound people, who get into problems and nobody knows about it. What we have to do is check on them. So after several discussions, that led to a program called Are You OK?, where they recruited volunteers to phone the homes in Novato on homebound seniors, and if they don't answer, then they send a police officer to find out, are you okay? So if they answer, okay, how are you? Fine. You're doing okay? Fine. And then they phone the next person. So they developed that program, and Martha was instrumental in doing that also. She was involved with a lot of things.
How does Martha's legacy live on today?
Well, of course, for our family, she's with us all the time, and that will always be for the rest of our lives. But when my mother passed away, people from the community reached out to our family, and there were donations made in memory of my mother. And of course, when my mother died, we really didn't think about those donations. And once some time had passed, we said, what can we do with this? Well, we decided to establish a fund at the Marin Community Foundation, which is called the Martha M. Martinez Fund of the Marin Community Foundation, to perpetuate my mother's work. And this fund, it will be used to honor scholarships to a community worker or a student interested in working with an organization that has an emphasis on Latino concerns. We will be honoring a Senior of the Year award for Marin County, and then that senior will then in turn hand out recognitions and certificates of acknowledgement to seniors who have done work in our community that shouldn't go unnoticed. And there's also a wonderful program called the Older Adults Senior Peer Counseling Program. And that is a program that my mother graduated from. And we will also be acknowledging scholarships and awards for people who graduate from those programs. So basically, we wanted to, as I said before, to maintain those bridges that my mother built and perpetuate her life's work in what she, I know, gave her the greatest satisfaction in her life as helping the community. So through this fund, it shall happen.